Okay, so let's jump back into the story of Abraham. In this next section, we'll probably get through the next few chapters and the next few lessons. It'll be about Abraham and his life. We're going to walk through his narrative. And so we kind of ended right in this beginning part of Abraham's life in chapter 12. We were going through the first few verses. So I thought I'd pick up again back with that story. They were coming into the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem at the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. So this is an interesting thing. Again, Abram has this experience with God appearing to him. It says the Lord appeared to him. Now, we're not given any other details, whether this meant the Lord appeared to him physically or, in some other form. Sometimes Moses, the Lord speaks to him from a bush, those types of things. Again, the details are not clear here. We'll see as we go through more of the narrative that the Lord appears to different people through this as the angel of the Lord or as a person or and so again, we're not quite sure here. But in response, Abram builds an altar. And so sometimes we see people building an altar and then God responding with his voice. And other times we see people building an altar as a response to God. And even as he travels on, he builds another altar. We're going to see this throughout Abram's journeys, that he's been promised the land, but he doesn't own any of the land. And really, he lives in a tent, but he leaves these permanent altars behind where he's going to the Lord. So really, the Lord has more significant being rooted into the land than Abram is at this point from how he's building. So we have three places show up, Shechem, Bethel, and Ai. And these are going to show up again when Jacob returns and, when the whole tribes of Jacob return under Joshua, and these areas will be conquered. So this is definitely well within the promised land. This is part of what's going to be mentioned as taken, these three cities in particular. So Abram is centuries earlier marking out the boundaries of this promised land. These aren't boundaries, but these are internal altars. And so again, the place where he comes in is called Shechem. It's a pass between two mountains. It is considered a place of decision. And I don't know if you've ever been in that place, but he's followed God here. He's come into this place, and now he has to make a decision. What's he going to do in this land? And we just see that this place of decision is a place where Israel comes in Deuteronomy to make a choice, whether they're going to choose a life of blessing or cursing, meaning they're going to follow God with blessing or idols and end up under curses. And then Joshua gives his last speech here. The kingdom of Solomon would divide in two at this point. This is going to be in the Samaritan middle region. And so we just see that this place of decision is usually the dividing line. How are they going to react? How are they going to move forward? And who's going to make the decision? And it's interesting, God shows up here. This is the place where God shows up to him. He's gotten far enough into this journey process, and God's kind of reaffirming, you're on the right track. You're in the right place. Are you going to keep following me or not? And he chooses well. And he continues even past that place. The Oak of Moreh might have been known as a Canaanite shrine. Again, God's just defining this whole land as Abraham passes through it. And again, this would have been very well populated at this time. So I just want to make sure that we start back with just a reminder of a little bit of where we are in the storyline of Abraham. And then we come into just the threefold promise and a set of covenants that God's going to make, or the same covenant he's going to keep reiterating over this process with Abraham. So Abraham's going to come into the land, I think when he's about 75, and he's not going to have Isaac for 25 years till he's 100. And there's going to be this whole process he goes through. And I don't know, it just seems like that's the way God works. And we see this in other people's lives, like David's life. He gets anointed as probably a teenager, but he doesn't come into that kingship for another same long time period, well over a decade. And we're seeing that here with Abraham. He's not going to see the fulfillment of even the first part of the promise to have a child until well into that time. So So we have this threefold promise that he's going to be promised, and we're going to see these different pieces come up in different interactions with God. And I just love how Genesis is very open about God speaking. We've seen that through the story of Noah. We've seen that with Adam and Eve. We've seen it even with Cain, right? These characters like Cain that aren't even going to be in the lineage and have this other storyline, and everything kind of falls apart for his lineage. God still comes and speaks and interacts with him. But here we're going to have this promise to Abraham reiterated by God multiple times and a different emphasis along the way. But it's going to be about having numerous seed, which means many. Seed means children. So many children or generations. So maybe he only has one natural son, but that natural son of the promise, Abraham actually has a few children, but are going to go ahead and have multiple grandchildren and great grandchildren, and it goes on and becomes a large people group, to the point where it's well over 1 million, I believe, at the time of Moses, I'd say about 500 years later, maybe a little longer. So again, we have this idea of numerous seed. Then we have the second part of the blessings to Abraham, which is that he's going to bless all people on earth. So he's going to have enough offspring and enough longevity to this promise that it's going to really matter to everyone. It's kind of like Noah. Noah was at that pinch point when he was the one that was going to repopulate the earth. So obviously he was going to influence. But now you're thinking, how can I, as one person like Abraham, how is he going to influence the whole world? How is he going to be a blessing to everyone? Just by his life of faith, and then the offspring he's going to produce is going to bring a blessing into the whole world. And then we have the third part of it. So he's going to great and prosperous. He's going to be a blessing. And then he also has a land promise. He's going to have this promised land. And as we'll see, this is usually described similarly to the boundary lines of the Garden of Eden. It's kind of like you're going to have what you should have had. He's not moving to the east, right? Like the other ones, he's moving towards the center of where God wants him. Okay, so we're going to jump into verse 10 and continue with kind of this narrative as we go. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land, and he was about to enter Egypt. He said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you're a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you now, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared because of your sake. So they have this discussion. She's technically his half-sister. He's married her. And so Sarai and Abram have been married for quite a while. And he's saying, you're beautiful. And when we show up in Egypt, they're known to take wives and kill the husbands. And so can you just tell them you're my sister and not my wife? So this is a lie, because as we've seen earlier, the primary relationship you're supposed to be defined by is not to your siblings or your parents. It's to be to your wife or spouse. And so that should have been what she was considered to him at this point, was only his wife, not his half-sister. And so again, what we're mainly seeing is this promise of blessing that Abram's already been promised by God is being tested. So the land is not being kind, right? There's famine. And so he's gotten this major promise. And isn't this the way promises work? And then there's this whole series of testing that goes on. So he leaves the land. He's going to Egypt. He has to go find food. And again, this idea of food shortage and famine is not new. It's been something that's been a problem ever since Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden, that they were going to have to toil for their food. The promise of this blessing is being tested. He cannot stay in the land. So again, and then the other part is, as we'll find out, and has been stated already, his wife's barren. So the second part of the promise is already being tested as well, the multitude of children. And so how can you bless the whole earth? How can you have multiple children? And how in the world can you stay in a land that's not producing food? So he has this promise he's been given, and none of it's happening. And I don't know if that's normal for these types of things, but it seems to be. There's usually a promise and then a process. And there's that prophetic word of God speaking, and then something that tests that. And really, I think this is testing his heart, like I've said. He's being tested to see how's he going to react when it doesn't happen immediately. Is he going to think that God's not faithful, that the promise wasn't real, that maybe God can't be trusted? No, he's actually going to pass quite a few of those, but he keeps trying to, in his own human ways, make this work out. So I'm going to say what they're doing here we're going to find out very quickly, was a very bad plan to lie about Sarah being his sister instead of his wife. So we will see too that Egypt is a place where quite a few times the Israelites later and even in Joseph's time will go to Egypt to be taken care of there, because the land, the promised land, isn't always fruitful. And again, we're going to see this. This is going to happen many times. We're also going to see a repetition here of deceptive scenarios. So this is not the only time that Abraham and Sarah will pull the same stunt. They're going to do it again after this. Even though this time doesn't work well, it's going to happen again. And then we're going to see Isaac and Rebekah do the same thing. Tell him you're my sister, and so they don't kill me. And every single time, the woman, as expected, is going to be taken into the harem of the ruler of that area, and then it's going to have to be dealt with. Okay, so again, this isn't a good situation, and we're not told that. It's not a moral commentary, but from reading this particular part of the story, we can figure out that God actually has to intervene here. So again, Abram makes this move to Egypt on his own. We don't see God mentioned in any of this story. Abram chooses to lie. It doesn't seem like there's any conversation. So Abram has a promise. It's not working out. He moves to Egypt. Again, that's really difficult. But again, none of this part of the story here is necessarily God directed. So we're very much seeing the human element. And again, like I said, we're going to regularly see the flaws in these narrations of these people. And so now we're coming into verse 14. I'm going to kind of skim through some of these verses, but again, I also just want to make sure we get the whole narrative. So Abraham's going to enter Egypt. They're going to see she's beautiful, and they're going to take her into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt with Abraham well, and he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, all this stuff given to him, camels, all this stuff under his care. So Abram now is kind of getting rich off of this because, he probably, the Pharaoh thinks he's basically buying Abram's sister to bring into his harem. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So God intervenes, and we see here that this was not God's plan. We don't always get that narration in the other deceptive scenes that we'll come up on, but in this one we do, that God has to actually intervene. Abram, from worldly standards, is making out well. He's protecting himself and his own life, and he's increasing in great wealth, right? And so these things are things that are look good on the outside, but God afflicts Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. So Pharaoh calls Abram and said, "What is this that you've done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did she say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. So again, God basically intervenes directly, and then Pharaoh, understands that it's God that's doing this and goes to Abram, when really we think in the story it should be the other way around, right? Abram should be this great man of God, helping explain this to other people and things like that. But that's not the way it's going. And so we see that Sarai ends up in his household. And because of this, now we've got this problem. I mean, I don't know what this does for a marriage either, when your husband's willing to give you away to the king of the area. Again, this doesn't seem like this is going to build a very strong relationship or feel like you're in a protected situation. So again, Abram is definitely financially benefiting. He's keeping his own life. They have food, but again, at what cost? So we just see that, one of the authors I was reading, I just wanted to quote, he said, "At the first touch of hunger, fear, and riches, the vision was lost and the whole enterprise hazarded. It would need plagues to restore Sarai to her destiny and deportation to get Abram back to Canaan." So basically, the mother of the lineage had been taken to the wrong man's house, and Abram was in the wrong land. So, I mean, they just, as far as the blessing for a child and for the land, they were blowing it. Like, neither of them should have agreed to do this. She was supposed to eventually carry the child of promise, and Abram was supposed to be in the land. So Abram is confronted by Pharaoh and basically kicked out. So he's sent back by God through a ruler that is probably not a godly ruler, right? So we do see these things happen in the lives where external forces come in, where God is working and speaking even through what we would consider possibly wicked rulers, to keep his major plan on track. So we see here really the two dynamics of God's major plan happening, but also human free will, and how these two things, and typically we'll see this good God that's pressing for faithfulness and covenant, and we'll see the humans like struggling to try to figure this out, and walk through the process. And I know all of us can relate with Abram, right? Like, you have promises, you have destinies, you have callings, you have even, I mean, it can be as simple as something where you're in school and you know you need to finish your degree, and how many times you get that tough professor or that bad grade, or the classes don't line up, or it's just hard and life is happening and you have to get refocused again, right? There's these things in life where we have this long-term goal we're going for, and things get tested along the way. And that's part of how we overcome and have that whole faith journey with God. Again, I bring up the fact that he also had his heart to tend to through all this. So we're going to move into Genesis 13. And this is going to be, now Abram is going to go back in to the promised land. So it says, so Abram went up from Egypt, and he and his wife and all they had, and Lot with him, into the Negeb. And Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negeb as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first, and where there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. So he doesn't just leave Egypt, he goes all the way back to where he's supposed to be, to where the altar is, and he calls on God again. So we see this like, I've done everything on my own, that didn't work out, and now we're back in the land. And he has Lot with him, right? That's the only family member that's come with him at this point. After, Pharaoh sends him back, now he's going to go live in the promised land in faith. It's going to be tough. Maybe the climate's not great, or the food sourcing. Again, Sarah's barren. So that's not happening. So again, he's back to where he started. And it says he's calling on the name of the Lord, which means he's making a recommitment. And sometimes that's what we need to do. And that's really what in the New Testament, the idea of repentance, and even in the Old Testament, is about. It means to turn and do something completely different and go back to where we need to be with God, to call on God yet again. Bethel is going to be continuously this place where Abram meets with God and others meet with God. Jacob's going to have his dream at Bethel. It's going to be the place where, we find that Jacob finds out there's a ladder to heaven at this place, right? There's very much what they consider like a place of worship to God here. And so we're going to see that come up over and over, that sometimes the people are really important to the storyline, but also the places where they are. There's places that are considered holy or sacred almost, in this sense that God keeps meeting them there. And it's interesting because Jacob doesn't really even know what he stumbled upon. He has that dream when he's there. And it's just like, oh, there's such an environment that's been cultivated in this place of meeting with God. Okay, so we'll see that eventually. But that's where Abram is when he's meeting with God. And then it says in verse 5, and Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Okay, so again, the land can't support all of the flocks of Abram and Lot. It's showing itself insufficient. And we're going to find out really quick that the promised land, it's not able to support people living that close right now. It's not as blessed and as flourishing as Abram needs it to be. And so this is going to be Abram's test again. He's going to have to separate even further from family. And the word separate is going to come up quite a bit. Right here you see it. It's in strife. There's of them living together. And it's kind of calling out all the problems that are going on of them being together. And so again, Abram has already left his other brothers and all of their kids, and he brought Lot because it seemed like his nephew, his Lot's father, had already died, so he's taking care of him. And so we're going to just show here now, we're going to have the story of Lot kind of come out, and it's going to not be a great story. Lot's going to choose to live in depravity of Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going to have a wife that loves that place. And we're just going to continue to see this thread of Lot being in trouble and Abraham being the man of faith in contrast to that. So as much as we fault Abram for not getting the promise, trying to leave the land, not having the child of promise like an Ishmael first, we're going to see even more that Lot is going to constantly be choosing the wrong thing. And so thankfully, Abram has returned to the Lord and recommitted. But now we're going to have, like I said, the story of Lot. And there's a lot of strife between them. And then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I'll go right. Or if you take the right hand, then I'll go left." So this is kind of strange because Abram is giving Lot the decision-making power when Abram is the older and the one that has the land promise. And it's not really Abram's land to give away because God has given it to him unless this is his heir. And in a certain sense, Abram is kind of treating Lot like his heir or his son because he doesn't have a son. He's giving him full choice of the land. Again, Lot, we'll see, is going to be the father of the Ammonites and Moabites, that they're going to have distinct issues in the land going forward with the promised people. So Abraham's line against Lot's people, there's going to be strife continuously. They would be ongoing obstacles to the fulfillment of the promise. We're going to see that in Deuteronomy when Moses, its time period, and we're going to see it again in Ezra's time period in the rebuilding. So the Ammonites and the Moabites are of Lot's lineage and are going to cause trouble in the land. So Abram brought this guy with him, his nephew, and now he's given him choice. And you're going to find out over the next two narratives of Lot, as the story develops, there's going to be two major narratives with Lot in them. Neither of them are very positive for him. So, and Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. So here we're seeing right off, Lot moves east, right? We've seen Cain move east. We've seen a lot of Babylon to the east. We've seen all of these people, every time they move east, it's foreshadowing that they're choosing the path of sin. And so again, Sodom, even here, is being stressed as a city of sin. And we don't know if Lot knows that or if he has friends there. But we're going to find out that his wife really likes it there at a different point. And she ended up literally dying because of that. And so the key words that are going to be seeing here is that Lot looked and saw what was pleasing to the eyes. So basically this idea of seeing what's pleasing to the eyes is the same phrase that Eve uses, right? She sees the fruit. And so it's a temptation. And he chooses east, which is honestly good for Abram because Abram's supposed to be in Canaan and stay there in the center of the will of God for the land. And so Lot is basically moving. It's still within the land, but it's definitely to the east, to the part that's going to get destroyed. And now Abram is firmly rooted. He can continue to expand and grow and not have this problem with his herdsmen. So in verse 14, we have the Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give to you, to your offsprings forever." So again, this is an encounter with God, right? God is speaking to Abram. We don't know if God has come near or not in some physical form, or if it's just a voice or in a dream or a vision. We're not told here, but God is speaking again to Abram. And this is a big promise, right? Look up, look around, everything you see, all this land, I'm going to give you and your offspring forever. Number one, what offspring? And forever? That's beyond, I think, most of the comprehension, right? Is this world really going to go on forever? You know, this lineage that I can't even get supported, let alone this land that's not supporting me and even my nephew. Now you're telling me that I'm going to have all these offspring and the land's going to support it and we're going to be here forever, like eternally. And so again, this family line will go on. And he says, "I will make your offspring as dust in the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. So Abram's told, take a bit of a trip, go see the land, go move around, and you're gonna be kind of nomadic. I know I'm promising you this land, but you're not going to build a house in some central location of it, and you're not going to be like a king that rules the land right now. I just want you to take a trip. I want you to scope it out. And again, what is Abram going to do? He's going to build an altar to the next place that he goes. So as he goes, he's going to be nomadic, but he's going to continue to build these things. And all of this is happening right after he's separated with Lot. He's made yet again another choice to kind of, and we're going to see Lot be, it's going to the city of wickedness. So he's separating yet again from this. This idea to spread out or to separate from someone was the same word being used at Babel, that things needed to be separated or spread out over the earth, right? So Lot is being separated from Abram. And then we have God speaking and reaffirming the blessing right after this happens. And it's kind of like that was a significant breaking point. I don't know if you've ever had that where there's some stronghold in your life or something that you just decided to get right with God or clean out. And it was this, for Abram, it was this fighting going on with Lot, and Lot really didn't have his heart in it to stay in the land in the same way. And so as Abram is making his choice to really be firmly committed to the land now, God meets him again. And I love that. I love the reaffirmation here. And so Abram builds the altar. He lives in a tent. And we're going to find out that where he's building the altar at Mamre is also the only land he's ever going to purchase. And it's going to be for a grave. And so this is going to be more or less the marking point of ownership of the land. And so Abram is finally kind of putting down roots as far as moving around, putting down more than just one altar, and getting a feel for this land thing. He's showing faith here. He's following God when God says to move around. He's staying in the land this time. And we're going to see that also into the life of Isaac, that Isaac is just told, just don't leave the land. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go make a war or anything like that. You just need to not leave. And so again, we'll see that come up. And then Genesis 14 comes about, and it says, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar. Okay, I'm going to just kind of summarize this. There's a set of kings, and I had to go look some of these kings up to find out a little bit more about them. Again, not everything's known. There's a set of 4 kings and then a set of 5 kings, all explained here. They joined together in the Valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea, and 12 years they served one of the major kings, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So this is an international war now, kind of right there alongside where Abram is living. And so we have, they call these the nations. There's 5 nations. Again, there's no moral high ground with these 9 kings that come together. One of them has been ruling with the other 5 kings kind of as 4 kings. 4 of the kings kind of rule under the banner of what we'll call Babylon. And the other 5 kings are kind of like vassal area states or something that decide to rebel. So they probably were paying tributes and things. And they decided after 13 years they were sick of it. They didn't want to give Babylon any more money. And so, again, they rebel and cause this war. So now the war, for this reason, has come down into this area because probably those five kings that are rebelling are down there. And so these other 4 kings have to deal with them. And are probably trying to exact the tributes and all this thing. So looting and everything that they want from their underling states. So Shinar, one of the names here, is most likely is Babylon. And so the main king first listed is the Babylonian king of this time. Again, it's a bit difficult to know exactly where some of these kings are from, just because of the age of this text. The other king is from Assyria, probably. So you might have the Babylonian and Assyrian kings together. The Babylonians and Assyrians are the 2 countries that are going to carry Israel off during the 2 exile pieces. And so these probably also include Elamites and Hittites and some other terms. Again, most of these names carry wicked or evil in them. So we're not seeing in these nine kings that are warring anybody, like I said, taking any moral high ground. This is just a battle over stuff going on. And honestly, this is only coming up because Abram's going to have to get involved. And so this is a pretty normal reason for a war to happen. 5 nations are going to rebel, and it's just what it is. So again, we're going to see that the king of Babylon to the east is going to fight the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah in the east. So the rebelling areas are in Sodom and Gomorrah, which Lot just moved to, which is why the story is coming up. Again, usually international politics, wars happen all the time and in these regions, but again, they don't tend to intersect the promised line of Abram or Lot too often. This includes the lands of the east, like the Jordan at this time. And again, this area in the east is described as, when they come into the promised land, as a part that has the giants. The east is always a difficulty. So Sodom and Gomorrah being over there, and then all the Babylon and Assyrian kings coming down in there to attack it. So I just kind of want to give a little bit of backstory. It took a little bit of digging to get the idea of what was going on here. That we're really in the middle of a great war. And again, we're going to come into verse 5 through 12, and I'm not going to read all this because it's just going to talk about how they're going to do this whole attack. They're going to attack them, right? And so again, this basically reads like an old war history. So probably there was an external text that the author, Moses, used for Genesis. So this was probably an excerpt from some other thing. And it basically says out by the asphalt pits, which is known to be an area out by the Dead Sea and by Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where a lot of this was happening. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then the Babylonian, Assyrian, and that whole group of kings that was the overlords, they took all of the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother, son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So they come, they kidnap Lot, his family. They take the whole city, everything that's there. Again, the rebels, being Sodom and Gomorrah and the kings there, are thoroughly defeated, just absolutely. And all of this stuff is now being carried up to the northeast towards Babylon, up through Syria. So again, we just see that Lot is being heavily affected by this international war. And now Abram finds out about it. So that's what's going to happen. So we see that the minute Lot separates from the blessing, chooses the area of wickedness, they get attacked. Now Abram, the blessed one, is going to have to step in because Lot has separated himself from the blessing. Okay, so there's one that escapes, comes and tells Abram the Hebrew, right? That's how it happens back then. No newspaper, no internet. So they have a courier, basically, because they knew where Abram was, and they knew that Lot was associated with him. So again, they come over to Mamre, where Abram is, and tell him, and he has two friends there that he's in some sort of treaty or alliance with, named Eshcol and Aner, and they are allies. Now, when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. So all the people from Sodom and Gomorrah have been rounded up and all their things, and they're making probably what is a slow trek, if you've ever taken women and children on a long wilderness trek, up into past Israel on that eastern side, up into Syria and towards Babylon. And so they're on their way. And so the army that is surrounding them and taking them back up was probably just part of that army. So the major parts of the forces might have already gone up into Babylon area and Assyria and gone home. But obviously they're carrying off this plunder. And so Abram gets 318 men plus his two friends, or who he's in some sort of covenant with, and their men. And they all take off, and they go at night and are able to route around them, probably take out what few guards were guarding this, so not maybe a huge amount or some amount, who knows, and they're able to capture everything back. They are then able to take all of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot and his family and bring it all back down. So this is a huge thing, right? We have Abram, who's just a very wealthy man. He's not a king, but he's for some reason been training up 318 servants. That always fascinates me. What was he expecting? Was that for his own protection that he trained them up? Was he planning that he was going to have to take the promised land? Or was this just something, you needed that many people? But that's a pretty large household to be feeding and taking care of. I mean, you have to feed them all day. And they weren't just trained as shepherds or worksmen. They were actually trained for a battle, and they were able to win it, which was kind of the surprise. Some of the comments I was reading about was, it seemed like a pretty small army, but they used tactic. They went at night. They did a surprise attack, it seems, to rout and make this plan. And so this was well planned as far as war. So it's part of the reason that it's kind of notable, right? You have this small, what you would consider just army that maybe hadn't fought much, go and be able to take on one of the larger armies that's just defeated 4 kings. So Abraham is showing himself large in the land now. These 4 kings are going to be thankful for that, and so are these cities that have been carried off. And he brings everything back, all the goods, all the people, everything. And so again, Abram is mostly just dragged into this because he wants his nephew back. He probably wouldn't have gotten involved if these kings had just carried off Sodom and Gomorrah and his nephew wasn't there. So we have this again. This is a big part of just setting up this narrative. Abram is now well invested in what's going on in the land. And then we get into verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Shalimar and the kings who were with him. So the king of Sodom's lost, and he goes to see Abram, probably to get his stuff back or his people back. You know, Abram goes, he collects them all, he brings them to his camp. He's got all the people, he's got all the stuff. And so this is the thing you would do if you were the king of Sodom who just got defeated, and all your stuff and people and wives and things and family members, right, are hanging out over at Abram's place. And Abram has done what these 5 kings of Sodom and Gomorrah haven't been able to do. He's defeated these 4 Babylonian kings. And so again, this king of Sodom is coming to see him. Kind of now, he's made himself known in the land as someone that is wealthy and well prepared. And so as this is going on, we're starting to see the blessings of Abraham now starting to flow, and they're affecting other people in the land as well. The king of Sodom is going to be contrasted here because also the king of Salem is going to show up, which we're going to find out name is Melchizedek. And the valley of Shaveh is near Jerusalem. So this is all going to take place near Jerusalem. And so we see the king of Sodom comes to talk to Abram, and now we're going to see then in verse 18, then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. So we're being told exactly who he serves. He serves the God Most High. We've not heard that there's another God-fearing person so far in this storyline, and here he is, and he's bringing out bread and wine, which is a very priestly thing to do. That's exactly what would have been served as a priest. And he blessed him, meaning Abraham, and he blessed Abraham and said, "Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And he, Abram, gave him a tithe of all. So again, without being asked, Abram immediately gives him 10% of everything. And so we have these 2 kings approaching Abram. One comes, we're going to find out, seeking his own, the king of Sodom. He wants a lot of things. And the king of Salem, Melchizedek, comes to give a blessing. And they're kind of being contrasted in the way that they're treating Abram and the way that they're coming into this. The king of Salem means Jerusalem. So Abram's right there. This is the king of the land he's in, Jerusalem. Doesn't seem to have a lot to do with the war, but could have. The war could have kind of passed through there, but again, not necessarily. And he's a worshiper of God Most High. So we don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of conjectures on that, and we'll get into that in a minute. This could have been as somebody, but we know that none of Abram's, like Terah, his father, had not been worshiping God. We'll find that out later. So this is kind of unusual, right, to the storyline. And we're seeing that Salem means peace, and Melchizedek means king of righteousness. So this is the king of peace and righteousness, ruling from Jerusalem. Again, those are big statements. We're going to see Jesus is going to be promised as the king of peace and righteousness as well. And we're going to hear that Jesus comes in the line of Melchizedek. So Melchizedek's doing the right things here. He's worshiping the God Most High. He's offering this priestly role and blessing Abram. He knows who the blessed one is. Again, we're going to see this king and priest role come back to Jerusalem under David. David's going to move both the kingdom, or the palace, so the kingship, and he's going to move the priesthood, the temple, right next door to each other in Jerusalem at some point. And so this is kind of a foreshadowing of that. It sounds like that was already happening under Melchizedek, but it's going to happen again under David. And so who is this Melchizedek? So there were 3 options given. I'm going to give them all 3. I'm going to give some of the pros and cons to a few of them. Some people believe that it's a theophany. It's a pre-incarnation coming of God. So Melchizedek is like God himself, or the angel of the Lord. Possibly not, because so the cons to this this one. Pros are, it says in Hebrews that he had no beginning or end. Again, that phrase isn't very clear what it means. It could just mean he was really old. And at this time, remember, some of the patriarchs are living 500-600 years. Abram is going to only live about 120 or so, maybe a little longer. But some of those patriarchs might even still be around. And so again, possibly not, because Abraham is so why not a theophany? Why not the angel of the Lord? Well, it doesn't say that here. It doesn't say this is the angel of the Lord. It doesn't, and Abram gives him 10%. It sounds like a ruling king. It sounds like somebody that could receive product, right? He's giving him sheep and goats and all kinds of things. And later we're going to find out that Abram meets God, and he knows what the angel of the Lord in a theophany is. He's going to understand that, and so again, that the text says this is Melchizedek and someone different. That would be one reason we might lean away from this being a theophany. Again, it's an option. It could be someone from Abraham's line. It could be from Seth's line. It could be his great-great-grandfather that's ruling there, and maybe he was sent there because Terah and that part of the family had wandered off to go worship the moon god up near Babylon. And now Abraham is being called back. And maybe there's been a large gap of generations that haven't been serving God. But this faithful one has been praying, Melchizedek, for decades and generations, that someday one of his great-great-grandsons would come back to Jerusalem where he's supposed to be, and wants to pass on the lineage. And maybe there's been a lapse there in the family line. We're not really sure because there's about 10 generations here, or 8 generations since Seth, Shem, since they got off the boat. And so we don't really know what's happened in that. So again, this could very well be one of Abram's relatives. It could be somebody like that at one point under Shem, because Shem's line was known to serve God, could have moved down here and been serving God down here faithfully. Again, Abram is the next one in the genealogy, and maybe it skipped a few generations if Terah and some of those other generations hadn't been serving God and had been living in the east in Babylon. So we just see this. Abraham is returning maybe to where he's supposed to be. And so again, that is a very real possibility. Third, it's just some God-fearing king in that region. Again, there was one commentator that said, well, maybe this wasn't a godly priest and Melchizedek wasn't following God. I don't think that's a real possibility because it says that Melchizedek was serving the God Most High. It doesn't use some other Canaanite god's name or anything like that. And the author Moses is kind of pre-discerning and telling us exactly who this is. He's making the point that this person serves God, and he's making the point that Abraham's going to tithe to him. That point's made in Hebrews. So I think that we're pretty clear here. This is either some God-fearing person, priest at the time, which is completely possible. The line of Shem could have kings and priests in it as God-fearing people. And again, and they would have known that Abel and even earlier on, we're making offerings. Noah had made an offering to God and had an altar. So those things were very allowed. So again, this could be in that line. Abram does the culturally correct thing and gives a tithe to the priest, gives 10%. And when you have a lot, that priest gets a lot. So again, this was possibly even showing respect for the local authority. And then we come into this last part of verse 21. So we just had this amazing encounter with Melchizedek. Abraham just generously gives him 10% because it's the right thing to do. The king has showed up, he's blessed him, and he does that. Now we're going to switch back to the king of Sodom. Remember, he shows up too. Now the king of Sodom said to Abraham, "Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself." So he wants his people back. He says, you know what? I understand that I've been plundered and I can't require my sheep and my stuff back. You can keep that, but just give me the people. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have raised my hand to the Lord God, Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich, except only what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me. Let them take their portion." Okay, so he's saying the two men that raised armies, pay them off, but you can't pay me off. I'm not going to become your paid for army, right? He doesn't want to be in any kind of relationship with this king of Sodom. He says, take your people and take your stuff. I've made a promise to God that I'm only going to get rich through God now. And maybe this was affected a little bit by his excursion to Egypt he wasn't supposed to take, where he got a lot of stuff. And the plague comes on him and they get thrown out. Maybe he's learned his lesson not to take other kings' stuff. And so here he tells this guy in Sodom, I don't want your stuff, right? That would have brought them probably into some sort of partnership. It would have made Abram seem like the hired army to the king of Sodom. I mean, you don't want to be seen as that, right? They've defied the king of Babylon. You don't want to be seen as the hired army. He might come back and want to deal with you too. And so Abram was making it very clear, you're not going to make me rich. I don't want that kind of partnership. No, just take all your stuff and take your people. But you know what? The two allies that I brought with me, they're on their own to make their own decisions. And if they need to be paid, you need to pay them. But I'm not a part of that. So again, we see Abram finally making some really good decisions here. We see that his faith and his blessing has extended to Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, and the kings there, they're starting to see him, and he's become a well-known person in the area. We see the king of the king of Jerusalem's come to see him, the king of Sodom's come to see him. Both those, and he's gaining favor. We see that the king of Jerusalem's blessing him and is happy to have him in the land, and the king of Sodom, nobody seems threatened by him. That this seems like a really good thing. Again, we see that there's just this constant contrast in this section of these two kings. One king wants something and wants to take the people, and the other one is there to bless Abram. So again, it's an important story for the whole development of how this is going to work out for Abram in the land. I think it's good to see how he's struggling, but then now he's starting to get blessed. He's starting to get rich. It seems like he's got his land down. And this is really where the story, again, it's not over, because the tests are going to come against the blessing yet again. He still doesn't have an heir, anybody to inherit any of this, right? They're supposed to be in the land eternally with this great nation, and he doesn't have any heirs yet. And so we're going to have to still overcome some challenges, but at least instead of running off to Egypt and selling his wife off to the Pharaoh, he's back in the land, he's making a stand, and he's really building his stuff there, and his army and his flocks, and taking some, not possession, because he didn't own anything, but he's really making out a spot for himself there. I think that's where we're going to end, and then we'll jump in next time into probably chapter 15.